Between December 1972 and November 1976, many colour episodes of Doctor Who were being wiped. When it came time to release these fabled stories on home media, the film and videotape library at the BBC began their hunt for exterminated material in 1978. They determined that although Hartnell and Troughton material was in poor condition, much of Jon Pertwee's era had been hit as well. An initial discovery heralded a black and white 16mm film haul of all episodes from season 7 to 10. Original 2-inch quad master tapes, however, were much harder to find. In 1983, when the last Pertwee episode was found, attention then turned to the possibility of returning the footage to their original condition, namely PAL colour. In 1992, the Doctor Who restoration team began work on recolorising the finale of Season 8, Jon's second season, The Demons. The basics of this first technique was using the surviving black and white film recording along with a Betamax low quality colour copy and placing the colour on top of the black and white film. The Betamax colour copies came from America or Canada, as that was the main place where Pertwee episodes were sold in colour, as most countries during the early 70s still only broadcast in black and white. With careful, perfectly timed communication to various American fans, the episodes could be recorded in low quality but full colour and easily transferable to U-matic tape. In a component video signal, there are two parts of the image: the luminance, which shows the light and dark of the image, which is in black and white, and the chroma, which is the low quality colour of the image. These two parts combined make a full colour and detailed image. Using this fact, the black and white film recording was played back simultaneously with the U-matic tape transfer of the American Betamax recording. Using a vision mixer, the chroma of the Betamax recording was overlaid onto the black and white film print, creating an, at the time, broadcast quality colour version of The Demons, broadcast for the first time in the UK since Christmas 1971. This same process was done for Terror of the Autons, The Silurians, and episode 5 of The Ambassadors of Death. Due to broadcast interference which created rainbow banding on the broadcast image, episode 5 was the only episode able to be colorised using this technique. By the time the DVD range came around and digital technology replaced analogue, these three projects were essentially started from scratch, using high quality film scans and digital restoration techniques to restore the film and videotapes to the best they could look. The Demons and Terror of the Autons were complete in colour, but what about the Ambassadors of Death? Well, we'll talk about that later. In 1979, Sue Mordaunt received a shipment from Canadian television stations containing standard converted NTSC 2-inch quad tapes of various Pertwee episodes. In a bit to avoid artifacts creeping in by simply standards converting these back to PAL, the restoration team managed to perfect a conversion process that reversed the original standards conversion process. This is known as reverse standard conversion, or RSC. This process was used for Inferno parts 1 to 7, The Cause of Axos part 2 and 3, Colony in Space parts 1 to 6, The Curse of Peladon parts 1 to 4, The Sea Devils parts 1 to 3, The Mutants parts 1 and 2, and The Time Monster parts 1 to 5. For the special edition releases of Inferno and The Cause of Axos, and also the release of Colony in Space on the Season 8 collection box set, a technique that used elements from both the prior techniques was used. Taking the chroma from the reverse standards converted tapes and using the black and white 16mm film recordings, the colour tapes could be paired with the black and white film, making the slightly fuzzy tapes much sharper. When it came time to release Planet of the Daleks on DVD, a manual colorization was commissioned for episode 3, but at the time a new, quite frankly, magical technique to bring back colour from the black and white film recordings was being developed. When these film recordings were taken, it was done using a black and white film camera filming a colour screen. For the recording of The Mind of Evil episode 1, a filter was applied to stop a cross-hatching pattern appearing from the chroma signal. This pattern became known as the chroma dots. This was the only episode of Doctor Who to be filmed with this filter. Each colour would have a different pattern, so programming a computer program to recognise the different patterns and apply the colour to the image would be a logical option. Through a lot of trial and error and manual intervention, the colour could be brought back. Combining this with the manual colorization, specifically the skin tones, the resultant episode is a brilliant result. The other episodes using this technique were The Ambassadors of Death, episode 2, 3, 4, 6 and 7, The Mind of Evil episodes 2 to 6, and episode 1 of The Invasion of the Dinosaurs. Episode 1 of Invasion of the Dinosaurs lacked the blue chroma dots, so the episode's colorization was not as good as others, so that's why it's listed as a special feature. So back to part 1 of The Mind of Evil now. The only option for this episode was manual colorization. This was done by Stuart Humphries and Peter Crocker. This took nearly 2 years from colorizing the first frame to the last. Stuart colorized the main keyframes and Peter colorized the in-betweens. Initially, all 6 episodes of The Time Monster were going to be reverse standard converted, like most episodes of Season 9. But in 1987, a black and white 2-inch PAL quad tape of episode 6 was found at the BBC. This allowed the restoration team a new avenue of restoring colour to an episode. By applying the chroma from the Canadian Betamax tapes and using the black and white 2-inch quad tape instead of a 16mm film recording, a much cleaner luminance channel was obtained. This episode is almost indistinguishable from the original 2-inch master tape. With the release of The Mind of Evil on DVD, the last episode of John Pertwee's Doctor Who 10-year to require recolorization was released. But now with the release of Doctor Who on Blu-ray, the restoration adventure still continues.